Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Virga and Bone, Essays from Dry Places, by Craig Childs, narrated by Rick Adamson. Virga, noun. Rain that falls but evaporates before touching ground. Bone, noun. Parts of the skeleton. What is left when everything else erodes. Introduction. To write this book, I holed up on a far side of Tucson, at the edge of the desert. In one direction, the night was lit up, the city droned on, and in the other stood dark mountains, saguaros rising into stars. My writing table was up against a rammed earth wall in a modest cave of a house, no extra bedroom, no doors inside, a cistern shower in the bathroom, and a composter for a toilet. I stacked and laid books on the work table, poetry mostly, Bass, Neruda, Oliver, Hoagland. There were a few longer reads, reminding me of what I was doing here, Abbey, Malloy, Lopez, Irvine, a mix of the living and the dead. The place was empty but for a couch, a refrigerator, a wooden kitchen table, and a chair that I salvaged from a dumpster in the city. My friend next door, down a faint trail through cactus, offered the place for me to work. My gal saw a picture I texted and said it looked like I was writing in a Turkish prison, bare earthen floors and walls. She didn't see the sliding glass door I left open most of the day, and the clouds of spring-green creosote bushes and big padded prickly pear cactus growing to the edge of worn steps. These weren't landscaping plants. They'd been growing here for centuries, swelling and shrinking with every rain and drought. Ribbed arms and heads of saguaros studded the skyline, where Gila woodpeckers and curve-billed thrashers kept up conversation, and quail bobbed on the ground like sly pear-sized hens. The Sonoran Desert in southern Arizona this time of year can be a circus. You have to get up sometimes and close the door to stay focused. At night, my lamp on inside, pages rattled out of my keyboard. I looked up at a fox as it passed sleekly by. Its nose, almost touching the glass of the door, slid closed. It glanced inside and trotted through creosote bushes where the dark of the desert took it back in. A block away was the rest of Tucson, the desert crunched into lawns and landscape gravels. You could draw a line dividing here from there, light and darkness, mountains huddled back from the city, and green from the rains and cool days of March. The other direction, roofs. I remember when I was a kid seeing road signs at the edge of Phoenix after the last subdivisions, upon which people spray-painted, "Save our desert." "Curve ahead, save our desert." "Do not enter when flooded, save our desert." I hadn't put two and two together. I didn't know why the desert needed to be saved. Those places are gone now, stripped and replaced, little sense of what might have once been there. I don't know who did the graffiti in the 1970s, but when I was a kid, I imagined them dressed in bandanas, coming out of the desert, pushing against the city, defending forests of ironwood and saguaros, quail bursting into the air like little jets. Driving back with groceries to the house where I was working, turning from pavement onto dirt, I stopped at a Diamondback rattler, half on and half off asphalt. It was drawing up warmth as the day ended. Not a good idea with cars coming by. Did it know the dangers here? Or was the snake not thinking car, tires, weight, death? I backed up until I could see along the length of its body from my rolled-down window. I told it to get off the road. It didn't. I opened the door, only got a head flinch. The snake laid out more or less straight, an arm and a half long with a mature stack of rattles at the end nearest me. "Go," I said, waving my arms, and the rattler reluctantly moved. I got out and shooed it along as it picked up speed with a few half-hearted buzzes of its tail. As the head went into the base of a sprawling creosote, out of range of a strike, I took a notion to reach down and touch the rattle, let the thing buzz through my hand. How often does that happen? I could use a little snake medicine in this book, I thought. It was not something I'd ever done, but seemed doable. Following the slip of the tail, 2 inches away from grazing my fingers, I said out loud, "No, what rattlesnake wants its rattle touched?" "No molestar la fauna," reads the sign outside of a biosphere reserve in the desert of northern Mexico, a few hours from here. The phrase rolls off the tongue. Don't molest the animals. Don't pick up desert turtles or pet rattlesnakes. The flora, while we're at it, needs no manhandling or groping, no more stately dead ironwoods stripped for campfires. We could save a planet obeying signs like these. I kept thinking about that snake as I wrote during the night, its elegant scowl and the sinuous armor of its body, diamond-backed to blend with the shadows. It carries a neurotoxin that won't normally kill, but will give you a run for your money, with swollen coal-black appendages and hallucinations. I've always been curious, but I'd rather not find out. The snake is the desert. The fox is the desert, as is the bee that flew in through the open door while I was mincing words, and attacked my head, stinging my face, shoulder, and scalp before I hurled it to the floor and squashed it, then staggered back to my keyboard. The country is not easy. Scorpions are here, too, and a lush variety of cactus I would not touch, growing all around the house and in the arroyos up into the tapering ridges of the North Tucson Mountains. How could you not admire this sharpness? The buckled horizons and unencumbered views are nourishing. Poisonous things and needle-tipped spines demand attention. A healthy agave with a fresh blade growing straight up, I never hesitate to reach out with a fingertip and touch, reminding myself every time how pointed they really are. I go to the neighboring house a shouting distance away, a friend from way back. She has a painting on her wall by Pima Maricopa artist Michael Chiago. It depicts an imagined ritual, could be any time in history, native dancers coming out of the rainy desert down to the sea, barefoot and raising their hands and colorful tablitas to perform an ancestral rite. Waves wash on shore like glass. Lightning strikes in the distance through the purple smell of rain in the desert. I could stand at this painting for hours. She brought me tequila in a glass with ice. A desert permaculturalist by trade, it made sense she chose tequila, a spirit made from the heart of the agave. The flavor was bracing, stronger than I expected, including tinctures of medicinal desert herbs that she added. She said she made the tinctures herself, rendered from leaves and stems, said she always adds them to her tequila. I drank because it was good in an astringent way, because it tasted like rain and desert and the sting of alcohol. It tasted like where I am from. All I think about sometimes is desert. Mountains or woods will do, but where I want to be at any given moment, if you catch me staring off, is where boulders are warm to the touch, where rain rarely falls, and the air feels like it's being played on the highest, tightest string of a violin, as if you could barely squeeze a drop of water from it. Some people dream in color. I dream in canyons, shaded, echoing swirls. I will be flying, or floating rather, my shadow moving across the sandy floor. Maidenhair ferns grow from a blackened bedrock seep. On the plains, with their rolling grasses and circular horizons, I look for bare patches, prairie dog towns, and lonely buttes. I imagine if it were drier what it would look like some day. Salt flats, hexagonal buckles frosted with haylight, not a bush or an ant to be seen. When it's pure desert, nothing but drought, you see the bones of the world. You see what it's all made of. I'm not saying it's better this way or that I want the world to turn to desert. I'm just a fan. I traveled to Tibet for a month on assignment, and on the long flight to Beijing, I sat in steerage rows thinking, Utah. What I could do with a month in Utah. Some are born to it. Some come to it later, not realizing until the skyline breaks a certain way and banners of Virga fall from clouds toward the desert floor but don't quite touch, that they had come home. You've chewed on green twigs of Mormon tea, pulping ephedrine out of them to the cadence of rock underfoot and the hush of wash sand, walking the dry runnels of southern Arizona or northern Mexico, or the red arroyos of the Four Corners. If you're going to be in the desert, I recommend encountering it in all of its forms. Rain, rock, dry, sand, canyon, mesa, beach. Take it into yourself. If you don't think the water you've found is good, take only a sip, or touch it from your fingertips to your lips. If it doesn't taste like salt, and it's old rainwater in a bedrock depression, even if there are a few swollen berries of bighorn droppings on the bottom, or if it's a big tank, a dead bat is floating at the surface, it's probably okay to drink. It will keep you alive. Yes, I've had giardia. This book is about pieces of the desert, its elements, its waters and winds. These pages are odes to what I see as ingredients making up the arid Southwest, the parts you take inside yourself one at a time, or sometimes all at once. I've chosen not to name characters because this is not about people. It is about essence. People are present only for scale. Some stories were easy to tell, flowing without looking up, and others I crumpled over, could hardly make sense of what happened. Any story should be this way. It should feel like pulling something burning out of yourself. There you find what you are devoted to. Mostly I wrote inside, so I didn't wander off. I left the house as few times as possible, going as far as climbing a metal ladder propped against a ramada out the back door. I sat on the corrugated roof and looked across boulder flanks of chocolate-covered mountains. My friend living next door has protected this land for decades, making a pariah of herself to county planners for being a watchdog, for not letting million-dollar homes go up on this patch of desert, for fighting roads and pavement and the wells drying up or turning to poison, and not growing rich over her labors, using rainwater catchment, turning waste into soil, one of the most noble ways I know of living. To have a ramada in the desert and rainwater in the cistern is enough. To have time to sit and take it in is double the blessing. From the roof, I took advantage of this blessing and watched saguaros do nothing, all of them silent, as if waiting for one in the group to speak. A notebook was open on my lap, and I began to write about the sea. Tucson Mountains, Arizona, Bean Tree Farm, March 2019. Virga. If I could see the wind, it would look orchestral. Strands and swirls nested into each other, braiding and springing apart. When it stills and coolness settles, the air would lie as smooth as water on a lake. Flying over the Four Corners in August, we couldn't see the wind, but we could feel it. We were riding inside an aluminum box with wings, the heat pan of the desert boiling below. It was good flying until about 1 in the afternoon, which was now, as a big up carried us through the hoop of a thermal and down the other side. "Time to be on the ground," said the pilot, turning us west toward the blue snakes of Lake Powell. He had a few years of experience with planes, a good and trusted friend from the back country, a novice growing less novice with every trip. It was only the two of us, crammed more tightly than astronauts in a space capsule. We knew the drill, talking about landforms through our headsets, memorizing canyons and red rock swales, making maps in our heads. We had gear to go on foot from wherever we landed, checking dirt strips around the Nokai Dome, not far into Utah from the Arizona desert. Clouds were scattered, and some bloomed into cumulus risers, a pattern of the day, heat lifting from blush-colored earth, entering higher, cooler air, condensing to moisture that sometimes, when everything is right and the prayers have been said, and a feather from the wing of a hawk sails up on a thermal, dewdrops gathering on its edges at 20,000 feet, condensing as moisture that falls as rain. No rain today. Clouds had a whiteness that said, "Don't even think about it." "Hall's Crossing," he said. "See it out there?" He handed me the map, and his fingers scooted down to the electronic screen on his knee, checking distances. We both preferred dirt, but this landing strip was paved, and it was close and safe. That's a reason I fly with him. He's cautious. He caught a whiff of something the other day, passing at sunrise in front of the Bears Ears Buttes in southern Utah, and he turned the plane around without hesitation. Didn't say anything until we'd pulled a complete gentle U-turn. As he scanned the terrain ahead, calculating a possible landing at Monticello, Blanding, or Bluff, envisioning his approach in case of power loss or disabled flaps, he asked, "Do you smell something?" I detected nothing but the slightly musty smell of a machine and old upholstery, a mix of body shop and furniture repair. He asked again, "A burning smell or chemical?" I said no. We flew on until he was convinced it was nothing and turned us back on our route. He didn't have to explain why he'd been concerned. Up here, small mistakes add up quickly. The pilot and I fly together whenever we can. A couple years back, we explored not far north of here, bringing backpacks and hopping one rutted old mining strip to the next in the Utah desert. That had been in October, in mostly gentle air, cool days and crisp nights, perfect for flying. August is different. Days are planned around temperature, airborne at the first crack of light, the coolest part of the day, and back on the ground by 1, 2 at the latest, before the sky turns into an inferno of upward winds. The plane needs lift, something to fly on. Hot air is thinner, fewer molecules to push against, not a solid hold. An old cloth wing like this, a 1946 vintage, needs good lift to stay airborne and resist the punishing updrafts and downdrafts of a shimmering desert afternoon. Hall's Crossing was the closest landing between slim canyons written in cursive, the airstrip sitting alone on a plain of rock and sand that goes on for miles, for days, forever. We landed, hiked around the area, cooked dinner, and settled in. Just after sunset, I walked the blacktop back and forth, talking on the phone with my kids. The pilot was at his tent, sitting outside with a screen in his face, studying the weather maps, his plane tied down and blocked. Love and giggles on the phone, and a voice deepening, asking what I was doing. "A few days out by plane," I said, "having a look at the desert, leaving at the start of light to see where the day pushes us." Hard conversations, sometimes, questions from home, a girl, a school grade, a thing said or done. I lay on my back on the hot runway. Air temperature tonight would barely dip below 90 degrees. Nothing was cool, definitely not the runway. Knees crooked upward, my spine settled on an oven top, back of my skull on asphalt, I talked through whatever hard thing it was, searching for words, giving sketchy advice at best, letting the runway cook me from below. We exchanged good nights and I love yous. Phone off, the evening sky returned. Stars not out yet. I sat up from the runway and looked across a horizon of distant scarps, red rock turned black. Some of the clouds in the west, backlit by an indigo dusk, were letting out spider webs of Virga. Rain, falling in long and gossamer veils, but not touching ground. You wait in heat like this, scanning the horizon for a cloud, sometimes through a haze of wildfire smoke that turns the world orange, when a drop of rain would be a miracle. You stop in the middle of the day and hold up your hand to the sky, the mountains on the horizon electrified. If the air had more water, if it were East Coast on a sharp summer day, the sky would be washed out and white, hard to tell distances until a plane flies through. In dry like this, you can see into the blue lens of space, eyes set to infinity. When you hear the word drought in the desert, it means magnification. These dry, rocky places are made of drought, created by absence, the sky holding back on purpose. When a drought is in drought, a knob with very fine settings is being turned, every 100th of a degree boiling harder. I saw a creek by my house, which I'd always seen running, dry up and not start again for a year, beaver having trundled off to who knows where, or died in their dens, waiting for moisture from the sky. Deserts are mummifiers, bone makers. Some years the rains won't come, clouds promising and promising, but did you say the right prayers? Did you pray to the right God? Global measurements of desert precipitation had to be recalibrated recently when it was discovered that satellite signals were bouncing off of Virga and not actual rain. 50% of estimated rainfall never reached the ground. By morning, Virga was gone, horizons played out and cloudless. Loaded before dawn in the earliest light, headlamps in the cockpit, the pilot showed me his screen and the day's coming weather. I asked about the green blob down by the town of Kayenta, the tail end of Comb Ridge, northern Arizona. "A little thunderstorm," he said. "It was left over from yesterday, not much to it." I asked if we could aim for that, at least get a look at the only thing happening in 100 miles. He agreed. Takeoff was slow, the ascent lagging on, night temps not low enough to cool the surface. We would have picked another week, but you take the one you planned, the hottest August on record, air thin and rising. No pilot likes spending too much time near the ground. You don't have space to improvise a few 100 feet up, where the ground could rise up in seconds. We both leaned into the climb, our shoulders forward, as if giving the engine that much more weight. After 5 miles, we leveled off at 2,000 feet, air propping us up better, high enough to relax. Once you're up, the world is yours, 70 to 80 knots, like driving through the sky with a tractor. Around 9, we landed at Goulden's trading post on the Monument Valley end of the Navajo Nation. We tied down and crossed a paved road for milkshakes at the gas station, weaving between RVs and tour trucks with open-air beds, the morning crowd already rolling, an hour and a half away from 100 degrees. We took on extra fuel and chatted with a retired German couple who'd landed in a silver-tipped single prop with chrome exhaust ports. They were out to see the sights of the Southwest from the air. Their plane cruised 5,000 feet above our altitude at a couple hundred knots. They raved, as much as a retired German couple raves, about flying in the West. They said Europe is like a traffic jam, radios crackling non-stop with flights in every direction, landings and turns, every decision announced, airspace chopped up over cities and towns. Out here, they said, you could do anything, be anywhere. You'd go half an hour without hearing a stranger's voice through your headset. The benefit of our plane was that it flies low and slow, more often under the clouds than over. Going through his checklist, the pilot tapped his screen where the green blob from dawn had moved north over Monument Valley. "This is our last up today," he said. "When we land, that's where we're staying. Where do you want to go?" I pointed to the blob of weather. Usually we fly in accordance to landscape, aiming for buttes, pivoting around mountains. We'd check on airstrips or scan for routes we could later take on foot, seeing if water holes had any water. The air has equal terrain, invisible canyons and vast open bays to fly through and around. Since he'd gotten his license a few years earlier, I'd watched the pilot test himself between the topography of earth and sky. He's not a bumbling risk-taker, but he pushes his boundaries. It's the only way to keep flying. If you don't learn, he said, you aren't going anywhere. If the first landing didn't work, bouncing across a trough plowed by a tractor in the 1950s on the cap of a southern Utah mesa, repaired only a few times since then, he'd swing back for a second attempt and a third, until he figured out how his plane works, how it responds to ruts, bouncing and throwing gravel, struts creaking, and he'd stick it on the fourth try. The green on his screen had no yellow or red, no alarming colors. It was a smear of low pressure, a memory of a storm from the night before. If he thought it was dangerous, he would have kept us away. Approaching from the north at 4,000 feet, above 70 knots, we saw an unremarkable cloud, a vestige of a cumulonimbus, a thunderhead on its last breath. Beneath it fell a single drape of Virga. The cloud was letting go of itself, disgorging strands of spider silk that tumbled toward the towers of Monument Valley, stone Yabukai dancing into a desert basin. At an altitude of about 1,000 feet, the heat of the desert was too much, the dew point too low to let the rain make it all the way. On the ground beneath it, I'd be standing on peach-red sand, boulders shimmering all around, my hands open to the sky, and I'd be looking straight up, asking for nothing. The Navajo word for water is twa, the word shortened at the end, the sound of a drop of water landing. Virga is a Navajo koan, the sound of one drop not landing, waterless for those down below. My word for water sounds like want, sounds like desire, which might not be so different from the Navajo. "Can we fly through it?" I asked. The pilot looked over at the sheen of drizzle, a single curtain. He judged distances and potential turbulence in air that had been stable since we left the trading post half an hour earlier. He said we should find out, and tipped the plane, her wings shading us from the sun as we arced toward this floating steamship and its diaphanous trailer. Entering the Virga was not as rough as we thought it would be. expecting rattle.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?